Nick, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks again for joining us. Well, I take back what I said to you yesterday. As I was watching the Trump supporters walking past you yesterday, I think I made the comment that, it seems as though things are going quite peacefully. It doesn't seem like there will be any kind of violence. And you put me in order and you said, well, the supporters are still coming and, things might indeed change. I was under the impression that things would go relatively peacefully and continue. What's happening currently in D.C., Nick?
Yeah, good afternoon. What a difference a couple of hours made. As you mentioned, when we spoke this time yesterday, a little bit later, this time yesterday, it was very peaceful. There was really very little going on. There were people behind me buying souvenirs. There was music. There was people playing drums. There were people marching with flags, but nothing like the scenes that unfolded just a few hours after that. This was the scene of a very angry mob surrounding the US Capitol building. Hundreds, potentially thousands of people on both sides of the building, some of them managing to smash their way in. And now here we are at around 10 a.m. the following morning, and it's a very different scene once again. It is quiet, it is calm, and the only people behind me are officers and a few other staffers and press who are walking around this area. It is a very, very different scene from that calamity and that chaos that we saw unfold right here in the heart of the nation's capital. Certainly a higher police presence on the streets. I walked a few blocks to get to this point, and there were lots of police officers around. I had to show my badge a couple of times to say that I was able to come to this point, and it was very clear that they were making sure that there was no possibility of problems, that there were no people who were in the area who were not meant to be. It is certainly a scene of calm here in Washington, D.C. this morning.
There's a lot of, I support criticism of the security that were there at Capitol Hill yesterday. And I mean, if you in fact did anticipate that more could happen later on in the day, if you could anticipate it, why is it that the police, the security forces were not able to anticipate the real security threat that was imminent at Capitol Hill? I mean, we saw people breaking windows, writing notes, doing all kinds of weird things inside the building. What is there still some kind of, I suppose, or will there be a look into why this wasn't properly looked into, the fact that there would be this sort of security threat at such an important building in the US?
Well, I think there was a level of anticipation. The DC mayor had certainly drafted in DC National Guard troops to be on the streets. There were extra police out, but it just seems that they didn't anticipate the levels of violence that they were confronted with. And now, yes, you're right, huge questions have to be asked as to why the DC police, the people who would normally keep this building safe and secure 365 days of the year, why they were not properly prepared, why they didn't have the reinforcements that were necessary to be able to combat that violence and that chaos that they were presented with, the people smashing in their way into the chamber. I mean, these are unprecedented scenes. We haven't seen anything like this in US modern history, this type of violence attacking the Capitol building. It last happened back in 1812. That was the last time that this building was stormed, more than 200 years ago. So I think that gives an idea of the level of unprecedented chaos that they were facing.
Yeah. Is this likely to be, I'll use the word embarrassing for lack of a better word. Would this be likely embarrassing for the US? I was watching international media, and one of the commentators said that, this is really difficult for America because, Americans can't really have that sense of high and mighty authority type of attitude when it comes to elections in other countries, and that foreign adversaries will kind of exploit this moment for the next time that the US wants to weigh in on election processes of other countries. Would this then translate this to being actually quite embarrassing for the US? What are you hearing?
Well, it certainly undermines the United States, but then Donald Trump has been doing that for the last few months by calling into question the democratic process that took place, that voting, constantly saying that it was fraudulent. That undermines the layers of democracy that the US is founded on. And yes, you're right, it makes it much harder for the US to then go to other countries, as we've seen in the past. When there were problems with Joseph Kabila in the DRC, when he was holding on for a third term, which was unconstitutional, the US placed sanctions on officials there. It put out statements saying that that shouldn't happen. The same for Pierre Nkurunziza in Burundi. The US officials were particularly hard against his government. But now the US has to find itself in a position where it is trying to hold other countries to account after the problems that we've seen here. It will certainly be difficult and a challenge for Joe Biden to try and salvage that reputation of the United States.
Many thanks to you, as always, Nick Harper, speaking to us from Washington, just outside Capitol Hill, in fact. Thank you very much. That's Nick Harper, our correspondent there in Washington.